Have a fun video you'd like to see featured on NCW Life? Email us at newsphotos@ncwlife.com.
Pybus University, where learning is a lifelong adventure. The Pybus Public Market is pleased to offer a series of unique and fun classes for the Wenatchee Valley community. Classes are taught by local volunteers with an interest and aptitude in the subjects that they teach.
Okay, so here is a great picture of Connie Memel. She is one of the most dedicated Forest Service scientists in our area. She is a silviculturist, and then she's also a forest entomologist. And her passion, one of her many passions, is white bark pine. And this is taken up in the Pasayten a couple years ago. I got to go with her, and we were looking at some white bark pine as part of a study. And she's actually in Missoula right now at the White Bark Pine Foundation Conference. So I said, Connie, you have to go to that. So she was really going to be the lead. So I'm get to do with the slides that she's developed, but I want you to know that Connie is sort of the brains behind our whole Christmas tree extravaganza here. Connie went out last weekend, so she wanted to demonstrate that it's not too early to go hunting your own Christmas tree. And you can see her there bending over. She had to probably take her handy dandy saw with her. You got to make sure you have a tool to get out there and collect. And you can see she's got that bright orange tag, and we'll show you some more about that in a minute. But I went to Hooked on Toys today, and they are not up to snuff. They have last year's permits and last year's information in a drawer. So you can't go tomorrow, but hopefully I triggered them to realize they need to get their current permits. But the Forest Service has made it really easy for you to find out where to go. They simply tell you on the front of this paper which roads not to collect on. They used to hand out a map that was hard to read, a mimeograph, and so now it's super easy. Connie is the one who really recommended our 4 species. And one of them really surprised me, and it might surprise you. So if you look at that list, tonight we're going to introduce you some native conifers of the Wenatchee National Forest, Douglas fir, and underneath it is what we call the scientific name. Notice the first word's capitalized and the second word is small. All animals and plants, we use this naming mechanism, and it's called a binomial. So the first is called the genus, and the second is the species. So we're going to use common names tonight. And with trees, you can pretty much use common names. But if you want to do a Google search, you'll often, this will come up, just so you're aware that there's a scientific name. Douglas fir is our first one. Grand fir, subalpine fir, and Engelmann spruce. And I want you to notice the hyphen up there in that Douglas hyphen fir. We're going to get kind of nitpicky tonight and let you know that Douglas fir isn't really a fir. But the first people that named it thought it was a fir. And they actually sent it back to England. It was David Douglas, who was out here collecting, sent it back to England. They hemmed and hawed back there, and then they decided it was a hemlock. And then some more work happened, and then they hemmed and hawed some more, and they figured out it was its unique own genus. There are only 7 members in the Pseudotsuga genus. Most are in Asia. We have 2 in North America. So it's really important to us plant people that you put the hyphen in there, because it's not a true fir. So we do have 2 true firs we're going to show you tonight, and 1 spruce. Connie wanted you to see that you don't have to hike to get a Christmas tree. She drove up to the end of the Entiat River Road, and she had read on the paper that you can't collect trees on the Entiat Road itself, but all of the side roads you can. So she went up Tommy Creek, opened up her car door, and there in front of her were all 4 species. So you don't have to, tromp around very far. Often you can just pull your car over and have a selection pretty close. And Connie loves to cut her trees right now. Because she's a silviculturist and understands trees, she knows that trees do go into dormancy. So that if you cut them now, and they actually are in a resting stage, so they are able to stay fresh throughout the Christmas season with some special ways that you treat them once you get them home. It is interesting that as we have a decrease in day length, that is a signal to plants, and especially to our conifers, to stop growing. They know that it's going to be the winter resting period. And all autumn, all fall, they've been developing these hardy resting buds. And then they've also been doing some internal changes that reduces their risk from freezing. We call that hardiness, and master gardeners I know are really up on plant hardiness. We have a lot of master gardeners here, but it happens in our conifers as well. So by late October, they've really gone into this dormant resting stage. So Connie recommends that once they're dormant, they can be cut, and as long as you store them in a cool place and away from artificial light, you cannot worry about those needles falling off. They'll actually, if you treat it right, you'll be able to have it last through the Christmas season. And we love to look at the Douglas fir bud. One of the neat things about Douglas fir is that it has this super sharp atala-like, like a spear growing tip. And it's the only conifer in our whole forest that has that particular growing tip. So anytime you're out in the woods, you can become an absolute expert on Douglas fir, because if you find that particular very robust, thick, spear-like tip, you are guaranteed that you're looking at a Douglas fir. It's kind of fun to become the expert because of this one key ID feature. How do you keep it fresh indoors? And notice, that's a picture of Connie's tree from a past year. Notice she's got a pretty big, robust tree stand. And one of the cool things that you want to do, as soon as you get home, you want to take a super fresh cut of that tree. And I want to show you a way to remember to do that. My husband grew up in a family that did this, and when I got married and we came home with our first tree, he cut this little circle and he wrote on it, and I thought, what are you doing? And it's a tradition that I didn't buy into right away, but now I am just so excited that we have this 33-year tradition now, where as soon as you get home with that tree, you're doing it for two reasons. One is so you can have a clean cut and get it into water, and by having this tradition, it reminds you to do it. So in 2005, this tree came from the Devil's Spur Trail, and this is actually, my husband loves this so much, he'll often do multiples. And my kids are all grown and not having their own families yet, but this is my starter set. So once somebody gets married, I'm going to give them a little starter set of these. So these are my extras. We couldn't find in the garage the set that we put out. But I tell you, it is so fun to have this big basket. It becomes a great conversation starter at the holidays. We all put them in order. I always fill the table and put them in order. So it just shows how you can kind of develop these fun traditions around a nature holiday connection. So Connie talks about checking the water at least once a day. And in those first couple days, she says the first 24 hours, but depending on how warm your house is, it is really going to drink a lot of water. So you've just got to be pretty vigilant about filling up that reservoir. And if you let it dry out, that is a quick way to end up having a shorter life of your tree with needles falling off. And you do want to try and keep it away from a heat source. So here are two of Connie's Christmas trees, and she actually puts live candles on her tree. What a fabulous tradition that she has started and continued, and she has special lightings and invites people over to see it. So here is a picture of what these Christmas tree permits look like. They're fluorescent orange, and Hooked on Toys, Arlberg's, Parkside Grocery at Lake Wenatchee, Midway Village at Lake Wenatchee, Plain Hardware, Dan's Food Market in Leavenworth, the gas station in Leavenworth, Shell Village Mercantile. You can also go to the supervisor's office, the Forest Service office out there across from the fire district in regular business hours, and it's only $5. And I think you're allowed one tree per permit, I believe. You need to carry that with you, and as soon as you cut your tree in the woods, you need to put it on. It's kind of one of those neat ethical things. It's signaling everybody that sees you that you understand it's a resource, you understand that we're all taking care of our forest, and it's a way just to kind of be responsible.
Pybus University, where learning is a lifelong adventure.
Stay up to date with what's happening in North Central Washington. Go to the NCW Life Community Calendar at ncwlife.com.
Pybus University, where learning is a lifelong adventure.
President Obama started this, and it's ongoing. Every fourth grader in the nation can print out a voucher for a free permit for a Christmas tree and also a free pass to a national park. So if you have any fourth graders in your life in any state in the union, This is just a really cool program that hasn't gotten a lot of press around Wenatchee because we don't have a close national park. But what a cool thing to take a kid to get their permit and then have them go out to be able to be the one responsible for collecting their tree. My family moved here in 1993, and that picture on the right was about then. So we always tried to go kind of close to town in the lower forests, but we've just become one of my most favorite things about the holidays is getting that Christmas tree. And then I wanted to show you a couple of mine. We have specialized in what I call the Charlie Brown Douglas fir thinning tree. So I always feel kind of bad if we go to a place, I don't want to cut down a tree that has a chance to grow and is not crowding others. But we have an awful lot of thickets of young Douglas fir that really need to be thinned out. And as all of us are learning more about wildfire and the forest structure, we know that Douglas firs in big groups are crowding and hogging all the water and nutrition that maybe that next door neighbor ponderosa pine tree is needing. So I found a picture where we really only got a half a tree and we put it against the wall that year. Several of these trees, we drill extra holes and cut branches and stick them in. So it's kind of fun to get a Charlie Brown Christmas tree and then get extra branches and, make it look good. But it's, and these are both Douglas fir. I like to think of a tree as just a different way of being a plant. We call them woody perennials. Perennial means they live more than 1 year. And the material in that center stem is wood. It is single-stemmed. And like in botany, there's always little exceptions. We have the Pacific yew, which has multiple stems. But usually you can identify a conifer as a single-stemmed tree. And then we talk about the place where all the branches are as the crown, and all the foliage, which is all the needles, which are leaves basically. All of that forms a crown, and then each of those branches are going off that support the needles. And the general definition of a tree, it's at maturity, is greater than 20 feet tall. And it is sometimes hard, especially on the east side of the Cascades. We have quite a few shrubs that grow more than 20 feet, and we have some trees that grow less than 20 feet. Conifers are king in the Pacific Northwest forests. So think for a minute, if you've traveled around the globe, around this 45-degree parallel, in the temperate zone around the world in the northern hemisphere, we are the only place that is dominated by conifers. Think about going to the East Coast, all of those leafy deciduous trees, all the fall color. Think about Europe. There are some conifers, but the dominant tree in other temperate places around the world are deciduous. Here in the Northwest, we have a domination of the conifers, and why is that? And it really has to do with our climate. We have a droughty summer, and then we have precipitation that falls spring, winter, fall, the rest of the year. And it's fairly moist and fairly cool here in the winter. So that combination is pushed toward the conifers. And one interesting thing to think about is conifers actually have to always balance the loss of water by evaporation when it's really hot and really dry versus having those same stomatas opening. The water is escaping when they're open to get the carbon dioxide to come in. So it's always a balance between cost-benefit analysis. If they're going to lose too much water, they have to shut down the carbon dioxide coming in. Turns out the conifers do conduct almost more than half of their annual photosynthesis for a whole year during the non-summer season. That's not what you'd think. You'd think summer would be the time when they would be getting all that food stored up for the rest of the year. But whenever water is available and the temperatures are above freezing, and they can kind of quickly open up those stomatas and close them up. And one of the cool things to look at on all of our conifer needles is those openings, those holes in the leaves or in the needles are actually in white lines on conifer needles. So one of the ID features is if you can see those white lines on one side or the other, and how many are there. And another thing we think about conifers, they're trees, but they don't have flowers. Think about the dogwood tree in Wenatchee, so beautiful at Apple Blossom. Lots of our deciduous trees really have big flowers, the tulip, horse chestnut, a lot of trees, we'd recognize them as those flower structures. But in conifers, they're in this group called the gymnosperms. They have male and female parts, but their seeds are actually born in what we call a cone. Most of our conifers are evergreen here. And we all in Wenatchee know the one exception. Who's been up to Mission Ridge or Blewett Pass in the last couple of days? Seen those larches turning yellow? So, I've been on the chairlift at Mission Ridge with somebody who said, I'm so sorry, all your trees are dead here. And it's like, well, no, there are a western larch. So it's pretty cool we have the exception that we get to enjoy that beautiful fall color. But most conifers are evergreen. They all have needle-like, linear, or scale-like foliage. So if you think about the western red cedar, that's what we mean by scale-like. And the needle-like would be the long linear leaves that we're going to see tonight. And in Washington, we actually have 3 families of conifers. We have the yew, the western yew. In our pine family, we have pine, larch, spruce, hemlock, true firs, and Douglas fir. And in the cypress family, we have cedar and juniper. As you're thinking, if you're going to go get a tree, which forest are you going to go to? You might choose the east side low montane forest. So if you imagine driving up Cashmere Canyons or Nahom Canyon or up the Idiot early on, Canyon number 1, it's where you first encountered trees. And that goes up to about 3,000 feet. The precipitation is a little higher than Wenatchee, 15 to 30 inches. But the main conifers there are all adapted to frequent fire. So ponderosa pine, Doug fir, grand fir, lodgepole pine, and western larch. And if you want to go higher, if you want to drive up like to Blewett Pass or go up to Mission Ridge and get on the Forest Service land up there, you're up in the high forests, 4,000, 6,000 feet, a lot more precipitation up there. And that's where you're going to find the subalpine fir, the Engelmann spruce, and those are 2 of the species we're going to recommend to you as Christmas trees. Western larch we talked about, and there's a golden picture there. And also lots of lodgepole pine often mixed in. So we have lots of choices close. Okay, let's real quick just look at how do you ID these, you've got your heart set on one of these species. How are you going to ID them? This photo shows that little white arrow on that key ID trait, that spear-like tip to the branch. And it's really, you can touch it and it feels like a point. So you can very casually go up, check it out, and then tell your family what you're seeing. It's kind of fun. And then we have cones also tonight. The cones are quite distinctive for the Douglas fir. I've got the arrow there pointing to the little tiny bract that's sticking out, and it has a tail-like structure. There's a local Wenatchee Native American story about, it's a very long story, but it's basically about the tree taking care of all the mice that run into that cone for protection when the forest fire comes. So imagine all these little mice that were trying to get in and their hind feet and tail are still sticking out. So that's a fun way to recognize the cone. So there's another picture of the cone, and you can see a green cone there. So that's one of the first species you encounter when you rise up out of our sagebrush valley. And they have deep furrowed bark. And if you drive, this picture's from up Canyon number 2. So if you drive up to the end of Canyon number 2, you want to walk up beyond the pavement. Douglas fir is going to be the main tree that you encounter.
Pybus University, where learning is a lifelong adventure. Are you wanting high-speed internet but don't have access to PUD fiber? Try Sky-Fi high-speed wireless internet from LocalTel. Call 888-8888 today. Pybus University, where learning is a lifelong adventure.
If you want to go high and you want to aim for a true fir, it's kind of neat to know that all true fir bark is very thin and it has little bubbles of resin. And you can actually pop those bubbles and the resin comes out. This is what used to be used to fix microscope slides. So all the true firs have that, and they all have these cones that sit upright on the very top of the tree. And in that middle picture, it shows you how the cones actually fall apart on the tree. So you never can find those cones intact on the forest floor unless a squirrel has cut it just before it's ripened. It falls to the ground and you can quickly grab it before that squirrel squirrels it away underground for winter food. So cones are much harder to find and see. Binoculars are a great way to see the cones on top of a fir tree. Or if you often get up on a slope and look down at a treetop, that's a way to look for those cones. But you can say automatically when you see those kinds of upright structures on the top, you can say that's a true fir tree. So here's just kind of how those cones develop, and it kind of goes, we'll go kind of clockwise. This is a subalpine fir. Notice how purple they are with resin coating. The cones aren't ripe yet. The seeds are green inside, still developing. And then on the right, you can see the scales have started to open up. And then as you come down, the scales are falling off. And on top of each scale is a little seed with a wing. So as they open up, the drying opens them up, the wind picks that seed up and carries it away, and it lands hopefully somewhere where it can grow into a new tree. And then you see these cool little candlesticks on the tree. And in winter, this is pretty typical. Now, the next one you might choose, it's pretty fun with grand fir. We call it two-ranked. Those branches are two-ranked. Notice how there's a left-facing set of needles, a single row, and there's a right-facing set. It kind of looks like two men's combs put back to back. And then notice how easily you can see that bare branch. That top picture, we're looking down, and you can see that beautiful brown stem all the way down with those needles going out left and right. And we call that two-ranked. And then in the bottom picture, the person's turned it over, and you can see it's quite white and silvery underneath. So it's glossy green on the top, silvery white underneath, and that's those rows of stomata there. So if you have a little magnifying glass or a hand lens, you can actually look at those and see how they're organized. But that's an easy way when you're out in the field to recognize this grand fir by flipping it over. So another species that might be fun to get is subalpine fir, and I think these are often commercially available. There's a picture in the top, that's the growing tip. Now think back to that Douglas fir growing tip that was sharp and a spear-like. Notice how round that is. Terry Lillibridge, one of our local Forest Service botanists, calls that maple syrup crystals. It's a rounded growing tip with little crystals on the end. So another way to tell a true fir, all true firs have this, is that kind of a growing tip. Rounded and then little, looks like little crystals have formed. Like our maple syrup has dried on your countertop, and it just kind of has that look. And in the hand, you can see that, look how those needles are all kind of being swept upward, but they are coming out all around the stem. That grand fir a minute ago, they were just coming out two-ranked, but here they're coming out all the way around. And there's a picture of the classic growth form of that beautiful spire of a subalpine fir. It's designed to shed snow. It's up high in the mountains, gets a lot of snow. By being very skinny, the snow can just kind of be shed as it falls. So you can see there's a winter picture with lots of snow, and there's a picture of that bark again that has, all true firs have the resin bubbles, very thin bark, and super slender form, and there's another picture of the cone. Now, this is the one that I said to Connie, are you sure we should use Engelmann spruce as a Christmas tree? And she said, if you are a cat owner and you do not want the cats to get your ornaments, this is the tree for you. So I thought, that is brilliant. So the neat thing about Engelmann spruce is, I like to say, think about those S's. This is sharp to touch, super sharp. This lower picture shows the pointedness of the needles. And if you try and roll those needles in your fingers, you can't, because they're actually square-shaped. And they are quite short, and they're a spruce. So let's see, what are those four S's? They're sharp, short, square, and spruce. Now, a lot of you in your yards, there's a lot of the Norway spruces planted in Wenatchee, those big kind of bluish ones, and you touch them and it's really sharp. So our native Engelmann is not as sharp and robust as the landscaping ones, but it is sharp. And I would just kind of put my hand on there, and if you're feeling about 8 prickles, you're going to know right away that's your Engelmann spruce. And I really love these Engelmann spruce cones. They're kind of like a musical instrument. You can take your thumb and go down, and those little scales kind of make it's just kind of a little bit of a soft sound. There's some big old growth Engelmann spruce at the top of Mission Ridge. It's actually a very common high elevation dominant species in the Cascades. The Cooley spruce gall algid. It's a natural, it's like the tree has a cold. We all have lots of things that don't kill us, but they're just natural agents of disease in all organisms. So this is an aphid-like native insect, and almost all of our Engelmann spruce that I've seen have this. And on the tips of the branches, the feeding of this insect causes the tree to grow this defensive cone-like structure. So notice how that picture in the bottom, it kind of looks like a cone. It's not. It's a growth. The tree's hormones are stimulated to grow in response to this predation by this spruce gall algid. And Connie says, just clip those off. If you think they're ugly, just clip them off. There'll probably be a lot of them on a spruce you might collect.
For all the latest news in North Central Washington, go to ncwlife.com or find us on Facebook. Got a news tip? Email us at news@ncwlife.com or call 888-2020.